Hey everyone, this is Jalen with Daily Code Tips. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about useEffect. This is another hook in React that works similar to component did mount and component did update. If you ever use a class component, if you use component did mount, this is identical to that in certain ways. So hooks allow you to use features in React inside of functional components. The stuff that you see in class components is component did mount, component did update, state. You can use those references in functional components. So in this, we're going to pass in useEffect, and I'm going to give you an example of how this works. So as soon as this component is finished mounting, this useEffect will be called. So if you call this useEffect like so, and you pass in this empty array, and then let's try and console log to the browser. Component mounted. Now if we go to the browser, as soon as the component is finished mounting, it will log to the console that is done mounting. This is identical to component did mount in a class component. And what you can also do is you can mimic component did update as well. What you can do is you can pass a dependency in here to check whenever this dependency changes, this will update. And before we get into that, this also allows you to mimic component will unmount. So whenever this component is unmounted, what you can do is you can say return and then console.log component unmounted. So whenever the component is unmounted, when it's off the screen, this will run. So you can remove any event listeners or do whatever you need to do whenever the component is unmounted. Now back to the dependency check. So in here, we can run this effect if something different changes in here. So let's try and add useState. And if you don't know what useState is, I have a previous video on that describes it. It's basically a way for you to use state in your functional components. So we can say something like const toggle and update toggle equals useState false. And let's just have a button here that when you click it, it will update toggle to not toggle. So it will just change the toggle basically. And so every time we click it, it'll be true, then it'll be false, then toggle will be true, then toggle will be false. So what we can do is we can pass in toggle here. And this useEffect will only run when toggle has changed. So if it's true and then it's true again, it won't run. But if it's true and then false again, it will run. So let's try that. If we go back and we click this button, as you can see, it gets mounted, mounted, mounted. Every time we click it, it runs. So it also runs the component unmount as well whenever you add a dependency, which can be helpful for things like event listeners. If an event listener requires something that changes and you mount the event listener, you don't want to reach the max event listener, so you can do this where you return it out of it and then it will unmount that. You can remove that event listener afterwards. Now another thing, if you don't add an empty array, what will happen is this will update every time the component updates. And since this component sees no changes in the browser, it won't continuously update, but when we click this, it will continuously call component mounted because every single time the component updates. So even when something else changes in the browser, something else affects the component, it will run this anyway. But if you want to scope it directly to just toggle, you can do that. Now, this is a brief introduction on how useEffect works and how it's related to component did mount and component did update and component will unmount. It basically handles all of those for you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I want you to subscribe to Daily Code Tips, and I'm out.